Hi everybody, MichaelBtheGameGenie here, and on today's episode of Game Genie Reviews, we're going to be taking a look at the newest entry into the home arcade market, the iiRcade. So that's right guys, today we're going to be taking a look at the newly released iiRcade, and specifically the standard model with the base. I want to say a huge thank you to the team at iiRcade, and specifically their charismatic leader Jong, for sending me this unit for review. So guys, let's find out if this at-home arcade is as premium as the price would indicate, and just what the experience is like. The iiRcade has now found a place in my home arcade, and I have to say, I think it looks great, and I am really enjoying the experience. What's strange though, is I never thought this would be a product that I would be interested in originally. I remember watching the initial coverage of the iiRcade when it was announced at CES last year, and I was perplexed with the concept and design. So this was going to be a unique home arcade built for both classic and modern games. Not only that, but the arcade console would also feature games that weren't necessarily arcade games and could be ports of classic console games or modern console games. The initial artwork as well kind of threw me off, as instead of featuring art from one of the classic arcade cabinets we all know and love, it had its own unique multi-cade design. My initial thought was, who is this for? I think David, aka Unqualified Critic, said it pretty well in his review that we as gamers are drawn to nostalgia when it comes to retro gaming, and with the initial introduction I wasn't getting that nostalgia pull specifically from iiRcade. I was very active in the home arcade space at the time with Arcade 1-Up, and their cabinets featuring not only classic arcade games, but recreating the actual arcade itself for home consumption really pulled at those nostalgia strings and made me open my wallet. The iiRcade didn't initially have that pull for me, and would need a hook. Then something special happened. There was an episode of the show called P-Dub's Arcade Loft, where the CEO of iiRcade was coming on to do an interview about his product. Right before he did the show, some news leaked about a previous Kickstarter that he as an entrepreneur had attempted that was unsuccessful. Instead of hiding and coming up with a story, Jong still did the show and gave us an honest explanation for what happened previously with his Kickstarter. Watching that episode and seeing his passion for his product, his vision for the future, his integrity and quality of character absolutely won me over, and I was now interested in his product. I was lucky enough to meet Jong when he was a guest on the Super Game Room Dudes, and just like in his interviews, he is literally the best. I reached out to iiRcade and asked if they would consider sending me a sample cabinet to review, and almost half a year later, I finally got the official heads up that a cabinet was on the way to me. The first thing I have to say is that the boxes showed up in pretty rough shape, and I was a little nervous about how everything would be inside, but when I opened the boxes, I was pleasantly surprised by how well everything was packaged, and everything was in pristine shape. I typically don't film myself putting a cabinet together because it's something I just like to do by myself. However, this is one time I actually wish I did film myself so you can see how much I enjoyed putting the bar top and the stand together and how impressed I was with the quality of the parts. But now that I have this thing together and in my arcade, let's talk about how good it looks and the overall quality. Just look at this thing. It's pretty sharp looking, isn't it? You guys know I'm a huge fan of the aesthetics of the cabinets, especially the Arcade 1-Up ones that recreate the look and feel of original arcade, but I have never really considered the importance of the look of a multicade before, and I have to say I'm really digging the look of the iiRcade. There are 4 choices available currently, with a black model that allows you to apply a Double Dragon artistic design to it, a Dragon's Lair premium cabinet, and the standard base model, which I have. Personally, I think all three look fantastic, but I really like the look of the base cabinet, to be honest. The black, the orange, and the blue all come together so nicely, and the original iiRcade branding and artwork on the cabinet looks fantastic. The iiRcade comes in two parts, with the bar top, which can be purchased by itself, being the main component for the unit, and an optional stand that will fit perfect to make a 3/4 scale home arcade that will look good in any room standing next to an arcade 1-up cabinet or two, or all by itself. For those wondering how stable the stand is, and the arcade itself, man, this thing is super sturdy. The build quality of the iiRcade is fantastic, and they use 3/4 MDF sheet for the wooden panels that both the bar top and stand are made from. These are connected with great lock bolts that stay firmly in place. That sturdiness you feel from the cabinet is the first sense of premium you will experience with this cabinet, but certainly not the last. The only area that doesn't feel premium is the T-molding, where they decided to use a tape-like material in some areas, where I really would have preferred authentic T-molding, or at least not tape. You will notice the overall design of the cabinet is a little dissimilar to what we are used to in North American arcades, and more closely resembles a candy cab, especially for the marquee area, where the marquee is not jutting out and above the screen with the speakers underneath, but instead it's a flat panel with the speakers included. This was a curious design choice, as we are pretty needy consumers and usually demand a lit marquee, but John had a vision for what he wanted this arcade to be like, and his vision included some big ass super loud speakers, and even me saying they're super loud is an understatement. The memes have been endless with 1.21 gigawatts of sound and the experience, but I have to be honest, once you start playing and you experience Zhang's vision in person, you no longer question the inclusion of all that sound power. The only thing I'm disappointed in with the sound is when you see the cool iiRcade splash screen, there is no sound with it, and I want my face to be melted off when this thing starts up. Maybe in a future firmware update, add some kind of startup sound. The control panel is interesting for the sheer fact that it's so high. In comparison to competitors' products, it's about 2 to 3 inches taller than an Arcade 1-Up control panel, and about 5 to 6 inches taller than the AtGames Legends Ultimate control panel. I am not sure if the increased height was done as a design choice for ergonomics, or was a necessity due to the design constraints, but seeing how well this thing was designed and built, I'm guessing it's the first. The control panel itself looks great as it continues the great cabinet design and features multicolor buttons with red on one side and black on the other. There are so many buttons, everything is a button. Volume up and down have their own separate buttons. There is an insert coin button separate from the player 1 and 2 start buttons, which I think is a great touch. There is also a pause/menu button that lets you either pause in the middle of a game, which is great, or hold down to exit to the main menu. The button I like the least is the power is controlled by a button instead of a switch. Why I don't like it is how you turn it on. You hold it down for a few seconds, let go, and hope for the best. I can never really tell when it's turning on. Once it's on, it's no issue, as you press it once for a quick sleep mode and press it once again to turn it on, or hold down for 3 to 5 seconds and it will power off completely. I do have to give credit to iiRcade, as the buttons and sticks feel great. This is the standard model, so no SAMWA sticks, but it feels pretty good no matter what style of game I'm playing. There is also a headphone jack if you want to play in silence, but it's like house training a tiger. Let that baby run free in the jungle and enjoy the awesome speakers. Then we have this screen, and it's so nice to see a big, vibrant 19-inch display on a home arcade, and another example of that premium feeling with this cabinet. I really was a little confused when I saw this would be a standard horizontal 4x3 display, as I knew the cabinet was made to also play modern games, which typically have a much wider screen, and I was wondering how these games would work on this screen. Usually a device that intends to play modern games would future-proof and add a wide display monitor like the AtGames Legends Ultimate, but they went with a square here, and you know what? It actually works. You look at a great game that I'm pretty familiar with, Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap, and how they handled that was to show it in its correct widescreen display like we used to watch DVDs on older CRT TVs, while having a background effect that looks pretty cool. Some games have been redesigned to fit the iiRcade screen, and they look pretty good too. But then we have classic games with a vertical orientation, and realistically, they would look small on a widescreen, but look pretty good on the 4x3 monitor, especially at 19 inches. Overall, all the colors look good, and the screen is super vibrant. I do have one nitpick on graphics when it comes to some of the classic games that we will come back to, and it isn't really a screen issue, but otherwise, this screen is really impressive. This cabinet is super good, from the aesthetics, the build quality, to the parts and components used. Everything is top notch. Well, the devil is in the real details, and that means, what are the games like and are they fun to play? Well, let's talk about the included games and the really cool online store where we can add additional games that makes the iiRcade truly unique. It's so hard to talk about the games for the iiRcade because what's included or available now is only part of the story. You really have to look at the iiRcade different from almost all of its competitors, as this is more like a console release than it is a one-and-done arcade like we are used to. While we can't do a final review right now, we can talk about some of the included games and also some of the available games that I have added to my cabinet because there are a lot to try right now. First off, let's talk about Star Power, or the cabinet selling games, and right off the bat, I have to talk about Dragon's Lair and Double Dragon. Realistically, one of these games are already headlining an Arcade 1UP cabinet, and let's be honest, if Arcade 1UP announced a Double Dragon cabinet tomorrow, you know you would buy it. I personally am so excited to have a copy of Dragon's Lair finally. While I know it's not the actual arcade ROM, it's designed specifically for iiRcade, and it's really close, and certainly my favorite way to play the game currently. Also, for those of you saying it's not a fun game, I grew up on the Sega CD, and I think it's awesome. In fact, I had the Sega CD Dragon's Lair game too. Double Dragon is also included on the cabinet, and another personal favorite of mine. One of my best friends growing up, Dave, had a Double Dragon arcade in his basement for a while, so it's super nostalgic to me. Double Dragon also seems to be a hard game to emulate, as it usually has a ton of slowdown, so it's great to see that it's optimized to run pretty smoothly here. There are 11 games in total, included with a mix of new and old, even some games that feature online multiplayer, and some games I'm discovering for the first time like Gunbird, which I totally wasn't familiar with and has been an absolute blast to play. For those of you who like bullet hell vertical shooters, you are really gonna dig this one if you aren't already familiar. Then we move on to the store and the ability to add new games, which really lets you tailor this arcade experience to your own desires. iiRcade were kind enough to offer to send me some games to try as well, so I made sure I picked up some personal favorites as well as some modern games so I could see everything the arcade had to offer. Well, up to this point. First off, let's talk about some of the retro games, and I made a point of playing Space Harrier because it's such an iconic Sega arcade game, and I really dig it. It plays really well just like I remember, and the great controls and sound of the iiRcade make playing this game such a treat. One area of concern for me is with retro games on the console. They look good, but it's not as sharp as I have seen them look on other devices like the Legends Ultimate. It isn't a question of power obviously, because this thing is overpowered for retro games, and it isn't the screen because that looks amazing when playing modern games. It appears there may be some kind of filter on the retro games that slightly decreases the sharpness of the pixels. Not a deal breaker by any means, and they still look great. Then we move on to some of the modern games, and the first thing I wanted to try was a racer, so I pulled up Riptide, and let me tell you, I had a lot of fun playing this game on this cabinet. I was concerned about playing a racing game without a wheel or a yoke, but this played great and was a blast. I then of course moved on to Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap, and what a beautiful and fun game, and while definitively a console game, it still fits being in an arcade cabinet and plays well and gives a game I previously finished a new lease on life to finish it on a different platform. The last game I really want to talk about is one I was probably the most interested to try because I thought it might be a train wreck. I'm talking about Dead Effect 2, which is a console-based first-person shooter on an arcade cabinet. I mean, how would that work on an arcade cabinet? So I turned it on, and well, you have to use both sticks, plus the buttons to play, so it's a little weird to get used to controlling. The game starts, and I start killing guys, and get lost in the ambience of this survival horror first-person shooter, and I completely forget I'm playing this on an arcade cabinet and just get lost in the experience. John, you have done it. I never thought it was possible, but despite the genre, despite the time period, whatever I seem to play on this iiRcade is a fun experience, and I look forward to seeing what else will pop up in the shop in the future to add to this cabinet. So So guys, that's my initial review on the iiRcade. Yes, I did say initial because, like I mentioned earlier, this is a story still in progress, and I can't give you the true value of the iiRcade till we find out what's coming out in the future on the iiRcade game store. Like for example, one of my favorite games, Ease, is coming out on the iiRcade game store. Ease is an action RPG, which should be totally wrong to play on an arcade cabinet, but you know what? I'm going to buy it, I'm going to try it on the iiRcade, and just like all the other games I second guessed, they're going to prove me wrong with this one as well. Should you buy an iiRcade? I'm going to be honest with you, it's extremely pricey. I'll leave a link to the website so you can go take a look and decide for yourself. But let me tell you what you are getting. You're getting a premium at-home arcade with better specs and controls than a lot of their competitors on the market. It also has a very diverse game lineup featuring modern games that you might be interested in, as well as a mix of classic arcade games that are must-plays. Me personally, I'm very surprised with how much I enjoy the iiRcade, and I want to give a huge congratulations to the team at iiRcade, and specifically John, on building an amazing quality product and an even better community. Thank you everybody so very much for watching. This is Michael B. the Game Genie, and I'll talk to you next time.